the Franchise Secrets Podcast with your host, Eric Van Horn. And today's guest is a great friend of mine, Lance Freeman. And Lance has been around the franchise industry in many different ways as a franchisee, as a master, and franchisee in a different system. Been part of the franchisors teams, and part of a company now that has helped over 3,000 people become franchisees. So when I was thinking about somebody to give us some insights into the franchise development world or buying a franchise world, there's nobody better in my mind with more experience and diverse experience than my buddy Lance. So Lance, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
I'm honored and flattered with your kind words.
Well, I was thinking, what I want to do is give people some insights that they're not going to get anywhere else. And, and you're not here to pitch a brand. I mean, you've been a part of a lot of different brands, and they've gone on to be, very successful. And so you're not pitching anything. This is just pure value and insight into the development process that a lot of people go through, and they don't know at what point they're getting sold, at what point they're getting pitched, and what's real out there. And that's my goal, is to give people the inside information that most people don't get because they're not on the inside of the industry like we are. So how does that sound?
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. Happy to help. You mentioned something interesting there. You said kind of they don't know when they're getting pitched. I think one of the things that's really important in our process is I really like candidates to feel like we are giving them ultimate transparency into our system and giving them as much information as they can possibly get to help them make an informed decision about the opportunity, good, bad, or whatever it is. We want them to kind of know everything and kind of walk into these opportunities with their eyes wide open. Hopefully, there's not too much bad stuff out there, but nothing's perfect, as I always like to say. And so, in our process, one of the things that we do, and I think this is really important, is we ensure that our candidates are able to talk to actual franchisees that are operating in these systems, and a number of them, in fact, whoever they want, so that they can, learn from them and, hear how things are going. Is the franchisor supporting them? Are they making money? Would they do this over again? And are they happy and enjoying what they're doing? And, all those sorts of things, what type of hours they're putting in. And so I think that validation process is really key in ultimate transparency and kind of trying to get as much information to the candidate as we can, well before even them coming to what we call in our process, we have a discovery day at the end of the process. So we structure, I think I'll spend a little time talking about kind of how we structure
let's talk
our
about
educational
that
process. Yeah.
Let's talk about that validation process first, because that's what that's one of the most important pieces of it. And that's kind of one of the key pieces in your process when you're taking them through that. But there's a time and place for that. So let's kind of go back to the beginning and set the stage, because we're about ready to go into discovery day, which is near the end of the process. So to set the stage, what we want to do is basically, from your perspective, that we want to talk about the things that you wish every candidate, every person looking at a franchise knew coming into the process, and that they don't know today. So let's set the stage. There's two different ways that people come in the world. They use consultants or brokers, and that's like me. They find somebody like me that helps them through the process. That's a mixed bag out there. There's some that are just awesome, and there's some that are not so awesome. They come in organically, meaning they come directly into the website. They go into franchisee's website, and they're like, I think I want that. And then somebody follows up. So in your mind, what's the two differences between those two people? Because some people think I'm better off just contacting Lance directly. Other people think I'm better off going through Eric. And in your mind, like, what's the difference between those two leads generically?
Wow. Well, I'd say the organic lead or candidate is I feel like I have to do a lot of consulting myself to try to help them understand how this process works. And that the biggest thing that I think candidates that don't come through a consultant don't understand is that it's very much a mutual evaluation process. I think candidates coming through organically feel like the franchisor is just trying to sell them something, which is the furthest thing from the case for great franchisors. The great franchisors are looking for really strong partners and brand champions that are going to, execute well. They're in the royalty business, and unless that franchisee is a successful operator, it doesn't do them any good, to award a franchise license to a weak operator. So one of the things that I tend to see more, I think, with an organic candidate is they're just ill prepared for the fact that the franchisor is evaluating them through every step of the investigation as they're, evaluating the business opportunity. Just yesterday, I got a call from a president that we had what we call a president's validation call with a candidate.
When you talk about a president's validation call, this is a candidate at some point, they've gone through some of the process already, and they're ready to talk to the president or one of the executives, which is down the road a little bit further into the process. So at that point, they've learned a lot, and they're getting ready to talk to somebody that's pretty important in the organization. So continue on.
Yeah. So even back it up even further, well before we start validation, because we don't want them to hop on a president's call and really not know anything about the brand or, the economics, and to ask questions that would be very elementary. So as you said, we're much deeper in the process in terms of we've gone through an introduction to the brand, kind of what the differences are in the model, what the unit economics look like, what the total initial investment looks like, what type of support the franchisor provides, all those types of things before reaching what we call the kind of the validation process. And then one of the pieces of the validation process is a meeting with the president of the brand to get to know them and, kind of a little bit of break bread, but also be able to ask them, some strategic questions about the vision, questions about how they're supporting and those types of things. But it's also an opportunity for the president, vice versa, to get to know that candidate a little bit before we invite them out for a discovery day. And so the president will, even within some of the questions that are asked, be able to learn a lot about whether or not this candidate might be a good fit for their brand well before even inviting them to a discovery day. And so it's a bit of an interview of sorts, I would say, for both parties. And so again, back to your question, the organic lead is not really, they're showing up 40 minutes late sometimes, or they're, being combative on the call, not phrasing questions maybe as eloquently as they should, not realizing that, hey, we're both considering a partnership here. Then I'm going to get feedback from the president many times going, hey, I really like this group. I think they're really sharp, well qualified. Let's invite them out. I'd like to, continue forward progress with them. Or on the other hand, I'll get sometimes a call from them saying, hey, this one I just don't think is going to be a good fit. Let's exit them from the process gracefully and move on to the next one. So that's definitely a piece of this. We actually even get feedback from franchisees as well. You would be surprised. They're kind of protective about their system, and they'll follow up with me after and say, hey, I talked to so-and-so, and I think they're a good candidate. Or again, they were really disrespectful with my time, just sent over 2 times that they were available, not understanding that, I actually have a business and a family, and other things that I'm running. So a good example is sometimes we'll have, organic, send out a request to talk with a franchisee, and they'll say, hey, I would like to talk to you about, such and such brand. I'm available tomorrow at, 9 or 11. What time can you talk? Versus, saying, hey, I'm considering this opportunity. I know you're very busy. You own, a number of business, and you have family and time. If there's any opportunity to talk with you, I'd love a few minutes of your time. Tell me what works best for you, and I'll accommodate. It's a much different approach again. And that's the type of coaching that usually, great consultants like yourself will give, so that they know how to really get through the process efficiently, but also really show well so that they can get approved in the end.
Because what we've been talking about is just an attitude of a candidate going into a brand to start seeing that this is something they eventually want to buy. And inside the industry, like I am, I know the best brands it's a two-way street. You're looking at them as a candidate, and the brand is looking at you. Now, are there franchisors out there that are just trying to collect a franchise fee and they're going to take a warm body? 100% that those are out there, but the best franchises, that's not the case. So as a candidate, you can't go into it thinking you're going into one of these franchises that is just going to take a warm body. You're actually running up against somebody that's super selective on who they bring in. So that's what we've been talking about. Let's go back to the very beginning and kind of go step by step through the whole process of candidate comes to you, whether it's through a broker like myself or they found you on the internet. They're getting set up for that first call. And it's super important right now that, we'll talk about both, the pitfalls of having the wrong attitude or the wrong mindset going into it.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing that happens, lead comes in and you're setting up a phone call or a webinar that's most likely one-on-one with this person. What should they expect going into that call or that time with the development rep?
Well, I would hope that they would expect that the company or the representative of the company or the brand manager want to first get to know them a little bit and learn more about their background and why this is something that they're considering at this point. If they're just kind of jumping into a pitch, if you will, it doesn't really show that they're interested in this candidate and about whether or not this might be a good match. So that's kind of the first thing, is really learning more about the candidate than what might come across on paper. I would say from there, I think a lot of candidates, the way our process is structured is we feel candidates really want to understand they might kind of have an impression of the brand via the website or other information about it, but really understand kind of what is the brand DNA and kind of how is this different from anything else in the marketplace today? How does it compete in its respective industry and space and really differentiate? I think that's a big piece, because if you're in a space where there are some Me Too's, you want to know what that competitive landscape looks like and how you are going to compete with these other competitors in the space, and how are you different, so that will enable you to do that. So that's a big part of, I think, kind of introducing the brand, and I call it kind of the special sauce. What's really unique about this opportunity, and then I really think that from our perspective, I think you need to understand that the franchise candidate should understand a little bit of, should be asking kind of, what does a day in the life of a franchisee look like in your system? Are they going to buy themselves a 60-hour work week, or is it more semi-absentee? Is it going to be manage the manager? What type of role can I expect here getting into it? So that, again, we both are pretty aligned from the start in the process. Because if an organic does not know what this entails, then it might not line up for them. Again, working with a consultant, that work is done before. That's part of your matchmaking process. You're not going to line somebody up that's in a corporate position that doesn't want to buy themselves another full-time job within the rapid model, or vice versa. But we do get those that come through organically that maybe are looking for something different, so they don't know exactly what it is that we're looking for. So we want to have that conversation so that we understand their needs and values and what they're looking to achieve in the model, and make sure that what their expectations are, our brand lines up, so that we can tell them, hey, we're not that brand, or we are that brand. So let's keep moving things forward to see if there's an opportunity for a match. Go ahead.
What's the first or the worst person to come in on that first call to get the, hey, we're not going to have a second call with you type person? How do they come into the call? Give me an example of that. The candidate that you'd never want to talk to. You've talked to them. I've talked to them.
I've talked to thousands of them in my years. I guess it'd be probably the candidates that come in that definitely have the perspective of like, what are you offering me, and why should I pay, a franchise fee and a royalty for this business, and not realizing that, it's a partnership, and not realizing that there's a lot of value there. I understand they want to see what that, what is the value proposition of the offering, but, just right out of the gates, not even learning about, anything, saying, what are you offering, it's a little bit kind of, that's, yeah, I don't look forward to those calls, if you will, because they don't really understand the process, I mean, to be candid, I want to say, well, I want to flip the script and say, well, what, why in the world should I award you a franchise license? I mean, how are you possibly qualified to do this, But I don't, kind of go there, but that's kind of how I feel, when
it's like on a first date. If you're, talking to somebody and you're like, hey, why would I even want to marry you? And they're like, hey, why would I even want to marry you? It's like, that's not going to go very well. You have to get to know each other for a little bit. That's what that first phone call really is. I mean, like you said, it's getting to know, because I'm sure people are surprised at times, because you're like, wait a second, your expectations are off here. We're not going to be the right fit. This is not a sales process to try to get everybody in. So the salesperson, the franchise development person, really is trying to see if they should go to the next step. As so is the potential franchisee. The best thing that they can do is have the right attitude going into it, or expectations probably is a better word for it. Knowing, like, I'm going to this first call, I'm not going to get the secret sauce. I'm not going to get, validation that's in along the process. I'm not going to get to talk to the president or the founder of the company, within the first 30 seconds of engaging in this company. This is all a process. And the process starts with this first call to get to know each other and to get introduced to the brand. And then assuming that the call is going to go to a second call, what does that look like? What's next?
Well, once we establish that there's at least potential for a match here, from both sides, and again, to your point, just to tie that down, I'm sure, as you said, there's franchisors that are starving for growth that may not approach it that way, but your great franchisors that certainly have a lot of interest, they, don't want to spend a lot of time with someone that they know early on it's not going to be a fit. They don't want to spend hours and hours and take them through an entire process. So they want to kind of understand very quickly in the process, hey, is there at least potential for us to spend more time together and move the process forward? So kind of step two is, once we establish that, then we want to make sure that, from our standpoint, we want to make sure the candidate really has a full understanding of the financial model. I mean, as I always love to say, no matter how cool your brand is, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense, and so, what we've tried to kind of get into a lot is, I always say, this is, again, kind of back to your question about difference with organic, different with consultant, but, we get people that come through the internet and think they know what they want, but they don't always know that. And so, I've worked with those folks through the process, and they end up becoming a franchisee, and they're very unhappy because it wasn't all that they thought it was going to be from different perspectives. So that matchmaking process is really important to us. But from we really want to, for them to, first of all, the brand to make sense for them, kind of line up with them. And if they're doing something that they enjoy, then they're going to stick with it a lot longer. I always say, no matter how much money you're making, if you hate what you're doing, you're probably going to move on from it pretty quickly. And then the same goes on the other foot, no matter how, if it's a passion project, no matter how much you love it, if you're not making a good return or a decent return on it, probably going to move on from that too, right? So we want to get into the unit economics of the model, really help the candidate understand, here's what your total projected initial investment is that you're considering here, the low and the high side that you can expect if you invest in this brand. Here's what it looks like if you do one unit. Here's what it looks like if you do multiple units. So we really walk through. There's in the franchise disclosures document, there are 23 items. One of them is called the item 7, which all franchisors have, and it tells the prospect exactly everything that is entailed in that investment, from the build out to the franchise fee to operating capital, everything that you should know that you're going to invest in this business. There's no kind of, oh, by the ways later after you sign up and go, oh, hey, this wasn't included, so this is another expense for you. Franchisors have to disclose all that information to you. So we go through that really on a line-to-line item so that you kind of know the range of every possible expense in the business, so that the candidate can then get a reasonable idea and a good feel for what they can expect financially and have some ranges. Then the other thing that we do in our process is we like to help them understand the financial model. I call it kind of the unit economics of the business, and so that they can actually do some financial modeling to, again, understand how this business is going to perform in years 1, 2, and 3. You know, I always say one thing that we can't really make any guarantees in franchising. One thing I can guarantee is that your performance will never be exactly what happens. But you know, we do want people to be able to build kind of good, better, best scenarios with financial models, so they have a really reasonable idea of what to expect. Because back to our point on validation, we want them to use that later when they get to validation and be able to say, you know, here's kind of some of the numbers, talking with the franchisee. Here's some of the numbers that I'm coming up with for my initial investment. Does that kind of line up with what you experienced when you built out? Or, hey, you know, here's what I'm kind of projecting for year 1, 2 into you tier. Do you mind sharing? Is that kind of in the ballpark, or, you know, what is that? How does that relate to what you're doing in your business? And the franchisees, you know, once you get them talking, they're pretty upfront about, yeah, you know, you know, it cost me more in this area, or, you know, less in this area, or I made this in my, you know, I broke even in X month, or, you know, I'm making Y now. They're pretty sharing. You don't have to tee them up too much to get them talking about that.
But
whether they're happy or whether they're
not. If the prospective franchisee does not have an idea, to your point in that, if the prospective franchisee doesn't have an idea of what their budget might look like, they're going into those conversations blind, and they really don't have a benchmark. So is that pro forma, like you said, guaranteed to be wrong? You know, it's not going to exactly turn out that way. But if you don't have a benchmark, you're not going on anything. You're going to talk to one franchisee that's going to crush that pro forma, and one is not even going to come close to it. So you have to have a benchmark. And I love how you guys do that. And that's why you guys work with some of the best and the best franchisors do this, work with great attorneys to be able to put financial information in that item 19. So you as a prospective franchisee can actually take that and not say, this is what I'm going to do, but take that and be like, okay, I'm going to learn what I can from that, do what I think I'm going to be able to do, put together some low, medium, and high budgets, and then talk to franchisees. And that's, you know, I mean, that's how I buy my franchises. You know, I do that exact same thing. They've never turned out exactly like in my budgets, but a lot of people come in and they're like, how am I going to do this? And it's this point that is so critical. So, and like you said, franchisees are more willing to share, especially with someone that's educated. If you're educated, know the budget, know the line items, and have specific pointed questions to ask them, they're willing to share some of that stuff. You just don't go into it and say, hey, how much money did you make, you know, last year? Right. You know, that's like, you know, that's really not even useful to the person, because you might be talking to a 5th-year franchisee and that's been around forever. And that's a useless question. So the point of it is, work with somebody, a franchisor that's really good, that helps you understand the financial model from the item 19 standpoint. That way, when you go to validate, you can have really productive validation. So how does a franchisee have that really good validation?
Well, just to even tie down another point that you made there, again, sounds like I'm trying to promote your services here, but it's interesting because, again, an organic lead doesn't understand that the franchisor can't just tell them how much money they're going to make. So they ask that, you know, all the time, and you know, we can't tell them that. We don't know what they're going to do. We don't know how they're going to perform. We know what's in the item 19. The franchisor makes financial performance representations that they can go through. Again, they don't know how to approach franchisees properly, typically, unless they're working with a consultant. Like you said, they'll ask just kind of questions that are really not where they should be placed in terms of really understanding whether or not they're going to line up and make money. But anyway, sorry, you had your next question.
No, that's an excellent point. because you have to come into it educated. Because if you don't come into it with that right mindset, even if you do it unintentionally, there's still consequences for doing things the wrong way. It could be consequences of the franchisor's like guy is not, behaving like we want someone to behave because they're just always, negative, or, or another negative consequence is you're seeing things wrong as a prospective franchisee. You just don't understand, and you're just about to the point of understanding, but you don't quite get there because you're not doing things the right way. So what is the right way? Like, what's the right way for someone to get comfortable with their financial model?
I really feel validation is really the best route to that. The item 19 is great. Again, going through your pro forma numbers is great, but really talking with franchisees is, for me, really the best route to really understanding what can I expect. And if you talk to, I always usually say 7 to 10 franchisees, and, let's say you talk to 10 and, 7 or 8 of them are giving you within a pretty close range, and you have an outlier or two, you kind of know where things are landing within a range, especially, I think with that many conversations, I don't think you need to talk to 20 to 30 people. After you talk to 10, and if you hear a very consistent message, then that's pretty much, you're going to continue to hear that throughout the system. If it's all over the place, then that's, I'm not used to that type of system, but I know there are systems that can be like that. But in good systems, it should be fairly consistent throughout your validation in general with what you're hearing. And then that helps you to kind of, again, get a reasonable feel for what you can expect financially out of the model. If you're hearing a consistent message of whatever that performance is, again, 7 out of 10 times, you can say, hey, that's where the average lies. It seems like, and that's where, depending on how many units the franchisor has opened and disclosed in item 19, you can kind of benchmark off of that as well. And then you can say, hey, I think I can knock it out of the park, but so I'm going to set my goals here. But, my worst case scenario is here. But even if I'm average at best, I'm going to, be here. And that's, that still makes sense for me, is what I would how I would approach it.
Lance, I think anybody listening to this that has not gone through the process, if they listen to this as they're going through the process, they'll get, just a ton of value out of it, and just, do what Lance says. And the process will be a lot smoother. And it's just about having the right expectations from both sides. Because how can you, as a candidate starting to look into it, have the right expectations if you've never had the expectations before, if you've never gone through it? So I think that's probably the big takeaway. We're going to wrap up the episode here. We're going to have a part 2 with this, though, where I want to talk about more about expectations. I want to talk about hot brands, like when a brand's really hot, like selling a lot. How do you know if you're getting sold or if you're getting opportunity? And I want to get into who has more risk? Is it the candidate or the franchisor? So we'll get into all of that in the next episode with Lance Freeman.